Coming up on today's show, we're going to discuss the long-awaited conversation ever since the Russell Wilson news broke. Should the Falcons sign Russell Wilson? Then we're going to talk about a trade rumor that linked L'Jarius Sneed to Atlanta. But selfishly, I do ask off the top here to subscribe to the channel. We're 100 subs away from 20K. Be a part of Falcons YouTube history. Hit the sub button down below. Now, let's talk about Russell Wilson because he was released by Denver earlier this week in a move we all saw coming, especially when Sean Payton somewhat slipped up at the NFL Combine and said, we got to get the next one right, inferring that the current one is already wrong. But the Broncos owe Russell Wilson $39 million in cash. That's an important number to hold on to, and I'll tell you why later, because that number could be subtracted if another team signs him to a contract, and that would thus, create a potential where Russell Wilson takes a vet minimum to stick the Broncos with the highest tab possible. But first things first, I want to address this head on and go, show of hands, literally, right now, raise your hand if the number one reason you want to sign Russell Wilson is because he would sign for a cheap vet minimum contract because the Broncos already owe him $39 million, so why would he take a bigger deal elsewhere and take more money away from his new team? If that's your motivation for signing Russell Wilson, show your hands right now. And I don't think that's an awful idea. That's a very simplistic and favorable route. He's still a top 20 quarterback. Get a top 20 quarterback for $1.5 million. That's great value. But my question for those of you that want to go down that path, if the goal is to get Russell Wilson to save money, what do you want to spend the money on? Because I'm not interested in signing Russ to a super cheap contract, and the motivation to do so was to save money, and then not go on a shopping spree in free agency. ESPN came out with their top 101 free agents, and this is just their rankings of them, but it's a good starting point. And when you look at some of these guys that are going to get the biggest contracts in free agency, not a lot of them are really on the Falcons' wish list. Chris Jones is going back to Kansas City. If you go get Russell Wilson, you're not getting Kirk Cousins. I don't see Christian Wilkins coming down. Danielle Hunter is definitely appetizing, but I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think Danielle Hunter would price you out of getting another quarterback. You're not getting Baker. You're not getting an offensive lineman. If you're getting an edge rusher like Danielle Hunter, I don't see you pursuing Chase Young or Leonard Williams along with it. Right? We can continue going down the list here. A lot of these positions are spots that Atlanta doesn't really need help at. I see a lot of offensive line here. Some good edge rushers, but I don't see the Falcons spending money on three edge. Like, you're just not going to sign three edge rushers at the same position because you can, right? If you're going to save money on Russell Wilson, you'd want to spread it around your roster a little bit at different spots. And I just don't see 2 to 3 guys in the top 20 at different positions that Atlanta direly needs that they could save money on by getting Russell Wilson to afford these other players. Like, the Falcons have money to spend here even without getting a quarterback, whether it's Kirk Cousins or Justin Fields. It's not one or the other. And I think that really needs to get across. If you go get Kirk Cousins or you go get Justin Fields, you can still sign other players to go along with it. This is not a team that is getting by the skin of their teeth in cap space. This is a team with just 1 or 2 more very basic releases can have $57 million in cap space. You sign Kirk Cousins, for example, to a 2-year, $90 million contract. He's probably going to have a cap hit in year 1 of $30 to $35 million. You still have over 15, 20. You can still go get a top-tier edge rusher. That's the point I want to make here. If you want to sign Russell Wilson because you want to do Arthur Blank a solid, he's a billionaire. Let him spend his money on this team. That's his job. Now, I also will toss this in there. Not saying it's a guarantee, but Andrew Brandt, who covers the NFL closely, did put this out in the universe, tweeting, yes, Russell Wilson, an agent, could take a minimum contract from a team since Broncos on the hook for the rest of $39 million and try to get big guarantees for 2025. But as you learn working in the NFL, what goes around comes around. Not sure a team would want to do the Broncos like that. So again, I go back to, if your motivation to sign Russell Wilson is the vet minimum, I understand. That's really appealing. But it may not even be 100% vet min. I'm not saying Andrew Brandt's word is the word of God. But that is something to at least put into the equation. And once again, I don't think signing Kirk Cousins or trading for Justin Fields is like, well, let's pack it up. We'll see you guys at the draft. That's all the money we had to spend today, folks. No. I also just don't see Atlanta signing Russell Wilson and then signing 10 more guys to go along with it. I feel like you're going to be a little bit disappointed of, we got Russell Wilson, we saved this money, but then who else did we get because we saved all that money? Oh, no one really. We just let Arthur Blank off the hook, and he didn't have to spend a lot of money on a quarterback. Now, Russell Wilson this past season definitely improved from year one in Denver. Touchdowns up, interceptions down, quarterback rating up. Like, just going off the box score, he looked a lot better. I want to dive a little bit deeper. I want to look at some advanced stats with you guys for a second. In 2023, Russell Wilson's average depth of target, meaning when he threw the football, whether it was completed or not, how many yards down the line of scrimmage was his intended target? Was he going for deep shots? Was he going for guys sometimes even behind the line of scrimmage or right at the line of scrimmage? It was 7.1 yards. That ranked 25th out of 32 qualifying quarterbacks. Okay, his completed air yards, meaning did he dump it off to 1 yard guy and then that guy ran 50 yards? Or did he throw it 50 yards down the field and the receiver caught it in the end zone, right? How did the 50 yards get accumulated? He got 1,300 yards through the air. That's 24th. Yards after catch, meaning the receiver's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, 1,700. That's 14th. Russell Wilson last year was a check down quarterback. He still had some deep passes. He had a Hail Mary, a meaningless one, ironically enough, in week 2 against the Commanders. Some nice deep balls to go along with it throughout the season as well. But by and large, throughout the course of the season, he was a short, intermediate quarterback. He was not someone who pressed the football down the field. And I think as his age goes up, what are we doing here? We're just looking for a guy to be a slightly less turnover-prone Desmond Ridder. And hey, that's not a bad thing to get. Don't get me wrong. That's definitely an improvement from last year. But is that the bar? Just guys that were a little bit better than Desmond Ridder last year? Great. The Falcons no longer are a 7-win team. They are now 9-8. And you have the right to lose in the first round of the playoffs. Sue me. I have bigger aspirations for this team. So don't settle for Russell Wilson because you want to do Arthur Blank a solid and get a really cheap quarterback when you can still get a good quarterback and still sign good players. So let me know. Do you want to sign Russell Wilson? Yes or no? Right off the bat, get in the comment section below and let me know. For me, my quarterback preference has pretty much stayed the same. Goal number 1 is to somehow find a way to get Drake Maye or Jayden Daniels. That seems like a very lofty goal. I don't see a way that Falcons find someone to trade with, but it's the NFL draft. Crazy stuff happens every single year. Goal number 2, or guy number 2, I should say, is trade for Justin Fields. I like the age element and the contract element over Kirk Cousins, and I don't think the Falcons, with a very short window of Kirk Cousins' remaining years, are in a spot where they could just win a Super Bowl next year. They're not like the Bucs, for example. Now, of course, getting Tom Brady and Kirk Cousins are very different, but I think that Bucs roster was a lot closer to winning postseason games than the Falcons roster is right now. Number 4, it's Russell Wilson because there's just no other better option out there. And then number 5 is I'm going to pick the Winnipeg, I think the Blue Bombers. I don't know. That'll be my CFL team. I will resign from the NFL. Now, next up on the show, are the Atlanta Falcons interested in L'Jarius Sneed, the star cornerback from Kansas City who helped them win a Super Bowl, is evidently available for a trade, and the Falcons were linked to Sneed. But first, if you want to join Petey's Polos Club right now, Fanatics is having an awesome sale. I'm a big fan of this polo right here. It's got the retro Falcons logo on it, and it's 25% off. You're basically losing money if you don't go to chatsports.com/ATL Polo. Now, I don't know if legally I can say that, so if the FCC just heard that, just skip over that part. But for everyone else, get this awesome Falcons polo today by using our link. It's in the comments and description of today's video. Now let's talk about L'Jarius Sneed, the DB for the Kansas City Chiefs. The Falcons were among several interested teams, according to USA Today, for trading for Sneed. We'll look at their exact wordage in just a moment. But for those of you that don't know, the Chiefs franchise tagged L'Jarius Sneed, which means he's not going to be a free agent. You cannot sign L'Jarius Sneed. However, you could do a tag and trade where the Kansas City Chiefs trade him to another team, and then that team, 99 times out of 100, I would say 100 times out of 100, will then give L'Jarius Sneed a multi-year contract. Here's what Tyler Dragon, what an all-time name, from USA Today said. A person with direct knowledge of the situation told USA Today Sports that the Minnesota Vikings, Indianapolis Colts, Tennessee Titans, New England Patriots, Detroit Lions, Atlanta Falcons, and Jacksonville Jaguars have expressed interest in the Chiefs' corner. I'm just frankly shocked the list isn't longer. Like, L'Jarius Sneed the last 2-3 seasons has been one of the best cornerbacks in football. And he was so physical and violent and just dominant for Kansas City during their postseason run, right? He was one of the best DBs in football last season. Look at the coverage stats. He's not just a ball hawk corner, which sometimes leads to you getting burned. Go talk to like Trayvon Diggs or Deron Bland about that. I mean, he didn't give up a single touchdown in coverage. Quarterback rating of 55.9 when targeted. 0 touchdowns, 406 yards. There are so many things to like and love about L'Jarius Sneed. But when I see this, I start thinking a couple steps ahead here. Is the plan not to extend A.J. Terrell? Because making a move for L'Jarius Sneed is twofold. It's giving up currency, right? Draft capital to get him, and then giving up real currency, dollars, to extend him. 2 big moves when you've already got a CB1. Unless you think you don't, right? Unless Raheem Morris thinks A.J. Terrell's not our CB1 of the future. He's not a guy that we want to invest in long term. And I can see maybe how he gets to that point. I mean, A.J. Terrell had a great start, and I still think the stats here don't do him truly justice because teams are avoiding him a lot more now than they did at the beginning of his career, where he got a lot more interceptions and pass breakups. A.J. Terrell, make no mistake, is still one of the best cornerbacks in football. But maybe the Falcons feel like we like Sneed more, and we don't want to invest in Terrell long term. If you're curious what these contracts would run for, I cooked these up earlier this morning, and then we saw Jalen Johnson from the Bears kind of provide a little bit of a blueprint. He got a 4-year, $76 million contract, so Terrell is below that number. L'Jarius Sneed, I put at 3 years, $55, so both of these guys would be slightly below the all-pro corner from the Chicago Bears, and both of them would be ranking top 10, which is a very expensive investment for just one position group, right? Having 2 top 10 paid corners. The Dolphins did that with Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey, and they moved on from one of those 2 guys after just 1 season. But for those of you that are really curious what it would cost to get Sneed in a trade, I go back and forth a little bit on the compensation because Kansas City is looking for a 1. They're looking for a first. Atlanta's not going to give up a top 10 pick. If they were picking 24th overall, it would be a no-brainer. So what I can offer is Atlanta's second-round pick this year and their second-round pick next year. I toyed with the idea of actually giving Kansas City the Falcons' 8th overall pick, and in exchange, L'Jarius Sneed, and then Kansas City's first and second-round pick this year to make up for falling from 8 to 32. But I felt like that was just too much in favor of the Chiefs. So this is my trade offer. Let me know if you would do this trade. Keep in mind, this likely comes at a price of A.J. Terrell plays out the final year of his contract, and maybe he walks in free agency, and the Falcons decide not to go with him. So if you feel like Terrell is a cornerback worthy of being on the Falcons for 7, 8, 9 years, this is likely one or the other. For 2 seconds, though, man, it'd be hard to pass on that offer, right? And then you kind of try and hope they figure out a way to get both cornerbacks paid. It seems like a long shot, but it can be done if the Falcons with Raheem Morris and Christian Lake, their DC, who's a DB guy, feel like let's put a lot of our money into the cornerbacks and maybe skimp out other places, I mean, think about the DB room for Atlanta. Jesse Bates, A.J. Terrell, L'Jarius Sneed. That is a no-fly zone for 2024. All right, that will do it for us, though, on this edition of Falcons Today. I really appreciate those of you that tuned in. If you're still watching and you like the channel, go ahead and subscribe.